Welcome to the iFactor Consulting's Web Maps connector for Smallworld World Tour. In this video, we'll give an overview of what Web Maps connector is and what it can do for you. The very basic level, Web Maps connector is a framework that allows you to overlay or underlay various data vendors in the Smallworld desktop application. It also works with Smallworld GIS to some extent because of how the data sets or layers are exposed just as regular spatial object manager or universal collections. So the first thing you'll notice is the Web Maps connector toolbar here. It's optional, but it definitely helps you get around. So let's say we wanted to do a search, and we wanted to do a search for Cambridge, UK. We can do a search. The result actually comes back as 3 different values or 3 different locations, and we just want to go to one of them. And there we go. So you can see we have the Google layer turned on here. We've provided a graphical interface to make it easier for users to select which layers they want. So obviously you have the Google Road interface. We could go to Google Aerial, which is the equivalent of the satellite imagery. And then we could also do the labeled as well, which is street names, place names on top of the base map. We also have access to Google Terrain. So what this lets you do is take different vendors' base maps that are available on the web and use them as a geospatial context or reference for your own asset data. What else can you do? You can obviously rotate. I mean, pretty much anything that you can do with your regular Smallworld layers, you can do with Web Maps connector. You can also print, so I'm just going to do a preview here. But there you go. This is the quick layout in Smallworld for doing quick setup for printing. So let's go back to the regular view rotation. Let's say we wanted to go build, I don't know, what do we want to build? We want to build something at the Eiffel Tower. So we go to Eiffel Tower, that'll take us there, and there's the Eiffel Tower. But let's say we're also really interested in looking at the surrounding area. Well, obviously with Google Maps you have the Street View option, so we could say, pretend or say I'm here at this location on the street and I'm looking in this direction. Go to Google Street View, and there's the Eiffel Tower, and then we can pan around. Again, this is all within Smallworld, making use of the existing Google APIs. What else can we do? I just wanted to point out, we also have, obviously Smallworld has this overview window, so because the Web Maps connector renders on any of the map view canvases, it inherently supports the overview and object view and things like that. If you wanted to do driving directions, you could say I want to go from here to there to there to there. Click on driving directions. And you can say collect the waypoints based on my trail points. And of course, if you had a real world object in Smallworld, like a I don't know, a valve or a switch, you could select that object as well. And you could go here and say I want to add that selected object to my list of waypoints. And then you say go run, do your driving directions. And there you have your driving directions. We can say update the map to show the driving directions. It's possible you might want to change the order of some of the waypoints, so you can change the order there as well, and then get a different result. So that's driving directions. Let's say you were doing a build out here in this neighborhood and you wanted to dispatch a customer or a field crew to that location. You can click here and you can say what is the address at that location, and there we have the address, and then you can dispatch your customers to there. Sorry, your field crew to there. So what I've shown you so far is the Google layer, but there is nothing to say we can't use other layers as well. And iFactor Consulting is a licensed reseller of Bing Maps transactions. So here we go to Bing, and we can turn that on. And in this case, the imagery is tiled. It's a bit different than what Google has. Google has a static maps API, so it requires a bit more time to refresh. But Bing has a tiled API that we can make use of. You can see there's imagery there. Again, it's similar to Google. What you'll be looking at is differences in coverage. So in Paris, it might not be that a big deal, but in other parts of the world, one vendor may have different coverage than the other. The nice thing we do with Web Maps Connector is we can overlay different base maps. So we have the Bing aerial labeled, and we can overlay a traffic layer. So there's the concept of handling transparency layers, and we'll show a bit more about that later. So here you can see in Paris there's some traffic issues. All right, so why don't we go to, we'll zoom out a bit, and we'll go to North America. So remember, this is the Cambridge demonstration database, so all the asset data is in the UK, but we can get other data from other regions of the world. So what you see here is the Bing road imagery. Let's say we wanted to show weather events, so we can turn on the Doppler radar, and you'll see that there's some snow events happening. So I'm sitting right about here, so you can see it's snowing there, and you can see in Chicago and Detroit they're having a lot more snow issues. So obviously you can zoom in. But what you're seeing here is layered base maps. So we have Bing Maps as the base map, and then we're overlaying additional transparent type layers over top of it to give a good spatial context. So this kind of data would be useful for Smallworld Power On users who might want to see where the storm events are. So let's turn off that. Another layer we have is lightning strikes, and you can subscribe to WeatherBug to get the lightning strikes. In this case, the WeatherBug lightning strike network is global. We typically don't have too many lightning events in North America this time of year, but you'll see that when you get to the equator and south, you'll see a lot more lightning events there. So it shows the different polarity and such. So that might be helpful in power on situations as well to help predict or diagnose outages. So if we go back to North America, and actually I'm going to go to my hometown, to Boulder. Looks like there's 2 Boulder locations. We'll just pick one. let's say we want to turn on aerial imagery here. Again, you see houses, you see streets. Let's say you're interested in the parcel information. So we can overlay another, in this case it's a transparent layer. Showing these as rasters makes it load a lot faster. But then we can, let's say we're interested in this house right here. We can select that and we can say get parcel data. And select it. And once we've selected, we can actually click it. It's just another vector object in our application. And we can go to the editor. And in this case, we have some limited information about the parcel. So the assessor parcel number for the tax assessment roll, and the FIPS. This is, in this case, it's a U.S. specific identifier for the county that this parcel is in. But if we just say launch the county assessor page, it actually brings up a web page, and because we have that FIPS code linked with the lookup table, it actually brings up this information about the property information there, and you can look at previous year's taxes, those kind of things. This is all publicly available information, but through the power of WebMaps connector integrating with other vendor data sources, we can make that connection quite easily. And so let's turn off that. So let's say you're in Kazakhstan. And maybe the Google Street View cars haven't been there yet. It's possible there are places on the world where Google hasn't been. So you may want to do a comparison, right? So I just wanted to show you some here. So just our little canvas compare. So this is Bing. And then let's turn on Google instead. So that was Google Aerial labeled. There's Google. And what else can we turn on? We have a couple other data sets. We have a MapQuest, actually we have OpenStreetMap, so you could say OpenStreetMap, the Mapnik rendering engine. We'll draw that. Say show that. And then we could also say MapQuest. MapQuest Open project actually, there we go, uses OpenStreetMap data, but is hosted on the MapQuest servers, and uses MapQuest rendering engine. So let's have a look. So there's the Bing data, and we can compare it to Google. And if I look at this, I can actually see that in Bing, right around here, they actually have walkways digitized in Bing. But if you compare to Google, Google doesn't have that at all. Now, if you can go to, actually that doesn't help. So then we can go to OpenStreetMap. This is, we can see what OpenStreetMap has put in. And it turns out OpenStreetMap also has some of the walkways, but they seem to have more of the building outlines digitized. So basically, you need to be aware of your the service area or your area of interest you're working in, and use that to decide which data vendors you want access to. So while we're talking about OpenStreetMap, so here we are in Kazakhstan, and we know that there's some data here that we could digitize in. Well, how do you do that? If you are an OpenStreetMap contributor, you might be using a tool called JOSM, which is the Java OpenStreetMap editor for power users. So if you have that open, we can link the two products. Okay, so there's JOSM, and then we can say for this bounding area here, show in JOSM. You can see it's downloading the OpenStreetMap data into this Java editor. And now you can go ahead and you can do some digitizing, and when you've published it back up to OpenStreetMap, anywhere in the order of half an hour to a day later, the data will be available in your OpenStreetMap tiles or in your MapQuest OpenStreetMap tiles. So that tends to be a lot quicker turnaround than notifying Google or notifying Bing that you need to make a change to their maps. So there's definitely the power of OpenStreetMap right there. So let's say you're not in Kazakhstan, but rather you are in Thailand. And it turns out that in Thailand, there's a local provider that is case called Longdo Maps that wants to that you want to integrate as a base map into your gas pipeline application, your GTO application. So we could say import as a base map these things from Longdo, from Metamedia Maps. Actually, why don't we make it non-English? So at particular zoom scales, Longdo makes use of OpenStreetMap, but as you get closer, it becomes very location specific. So they've spent a lot of effort collecting a lot of data in their country, and now this is exposed as a layer. So going back to Web Maps Connector and what it can do, let's say you had your own satellite imagery. Right now we're simulating with Bing aerial imagery, and you wanted to overlay some local data from using a transparent tile set. You can do that. So there's the imagery from Bing, and then drawn over top of that is the local data. Again, that's all supported by Web Maps Connector out of the box. And then finally, to complete our World Tour Web Maps Connector, we'll take you to South Korea. And why don't we just go here this way? So there's Seoul. Right now we're looking at it in Bing Maps, but there is a local South Korean provider called Naver, and we can access that as well. If we have the API key. So once we have the proper key registered with Naver, of course it works. And they had a couple layers of overlays. They could show traffic, of course. And this is South Korean specific. So you'll actually see data here that is probably more current than what you would see with Google. Of course, they have satellite imagery. We could overlay the satellite imagery with various annotation. So there we have that. So let's go back to Bing Roads, and we will go to Denver, Colorado. And just wanted to demonstrate one final functionality A lot of these data sets are up on the cloud. It turns out various Smallworld users are also part of organizations that use Esri data sources in-house, and some organizations will have the Esri data appliance server, and that server will serve up imagery in WMTS or WMS formats. Well, it turns out we can also connect to that. So if you have an Esri data appliance or some similar image server in-house, you can connect to that with WebMaps connector, and there you go. So then you have the data that you've subscribed to with your Esri subscriptions available to you as base map layers in Smallworld. And there we have some imagery. So that concludes the end of the WebMaps Connector World Tour. If you're interested in evaluating this, please feel free to come to our site and download a fully functioning evaluation copy at iFactorconsulting.com. If you know of other data sets you want to add, please let us know and we can add those. But as you can see, we've been doing this for over 4 years, and we have a lot of expertise with integrating data vendors and providing functionality that improves the user experience for Smallworld users.